Welcome back, everybody. This is our third and final session of the No Stress Video Marketing Series. My name is Shelby. I am the marketing manager for Farms and filling in for Renee tonight while she gets to go on vacation. So we've learned a lot over the last 2 weeks, including how to tell our stories and tips for filming and editing. Tonight, we're concluding with how to make your content work for you. So before I turn it over, I have a couple of quick reminders. If your setup allows, please turn your camera on. Next, if you have questions that come up throughout, again, just put them in the chat box or unmute. And then, like the other sessions, this one's being recorded, so all three recordings will be sent to you, and you can refer back to them when you need to. As we wrap up this series within our Nourishing Our Roots program, we want to thank you all for showing up. Our goal is to give you the tools to advocate for sustainable agriculture and your own farms with confidence. Tonight's session is really about efficiency, learning how to take the work you've done and make it work for you across all of your social media platforms. We have Duncan Williamson again from Tellwell, so I will turn it over to you and we can get started.
Thanks so much for the intro and welcome back, everybody. I am coming to you from Long Island, New York tonight. I am in a hotel room we're out here for a film shoot, one of the projects we get to do that takes us all over the country every year to do videos, very much so in the same strategy and approach to what we talked about in our first session and the structure of things. But so I'm out of the office. So if at any point, like my AirPods is how I'm getting to you guys. So if things sound a little goofy, just give me a heads up. Let me know in the chat. I wanted to first thing just jump into a quick little a request from folks to jump into the chat. With I don't know how many people watched the Super Bowl yesterday, but the Super Bowl is obviously a big time event. It's specifically a big time event for people that produce video and short format video. So the commercials are always the thing that people get all excited about. And so I was just curious if, having gone through now a couple different sessions with us thinking about video a little differently than maybe you had before, if there were any specific commercials you might have seen last night that stood out to anybody differently, or you can even just throw in what your favorite commercial was if you had watched the Super Bowl last night. I'd love to just get some ideas there. We got Lay's right away. That's one from Ashley. Anybody else have any favorite commercials from last night? Pepsi with polar bears. Yeah. Cool. Ashley, what stood out to you about the Lay's one? What did you like about that one? Oh,
The farming aspect, that agriculture, my dad just passed away, so it made me cry. It hit home.
yeah. It had a very human element to it, certainly, and just like that connection that's we talked a little bit about early on, right? It's less about trying to sell a product, and usually Super Bowl commercials are very much so trying to either provide humor or really provide those like cool special connections and like the human emotion of things. See a Budweiser and the Eagle too, Pepsi with the polar bears. So I was on a plane during the Super Bowl, so I didn't get to watch as much of it as I had hoped. But one of the ones I really liked, which I think was released beforehand, but I think it was a Super Bowl commercial, was, if anybody's familiar with Jason Kelsey, he was the linebacker or lineman for the Eagles. Brother is Travis Kelsey. He has a company called Garage Beer that he's very involved with, and they did a funny play on the Budweiser commercials, but for garage beer, and it was them kind of shoveling the Budweiser horses poop, and then their sort of like garage beers were like their thing, and it was all about how Budweiser's the king, and then the garage beer brand was what they had when they went back into the stable. So I thought that was pretty funny too. But I see the Duncan commercial made us laugh. So one of the things that I hoped that you might just come away from this a little bit, as we have talked a lot more about video, both in our first session about strategy and approach and how you create stories. And then in our second session about some of the technical stuff behind how we put it together, that you guys will just like generally, whether you're watching movies or television shows or commercials like last night at the Super Bowl, just think about them a little differently. Notice little bits and pieces about them that you maybe otherwise wouldn't, or that you just otherwise before didn't know the words or the way to talk about them. So that's one of my little like side quest hopes that you guys will have from this session. So let's jump right into it. I'm going to share my screen here and then we'll get going. All right. So I first wanted just to check in a little bit on any questions and some of the homework. So we talked about doing that 3-shot sequence as a homework thing. You can throw in the chat or go ahead and speak up. How did people feel about that? How was it? Anybody? I know a few of you guys did it because I got a couple in my inbox.
I can tell you what my take was.
Yeah, go for it.
So right away, the app that you had recommended, when I pulled it up in the app store, it didn't have very many good reviews. So it took me a couple days before I finally downloaded it.
Yeah.
When I did finally download it, I don't know a lot of the words that they use. For instance, I played around with it a little bit and got pictures to load into it. I didn't know what split meant. I had to have a 15-year-old look over my shoulder and I said, what? I've got like 20 minutes of video here. How do I get it down to 15 seconds? I said, I can't do it. He showed me what split meant. So I would have to spend a lot of time working on it in this season while we're not in the garden in order to be able to do something with it over the summer. But it worked. I was able to get it to do most of what I wanted it to do.
Yeah. Thanks for mentioning that. And I understand and can definitely appreciate like a lot of these little tools are new and different. And one of the most frustrating parts is a lot of them use different terms. So you might use, I know somebody had mentioned that they use Canva, which is another tool that you can also use. Canva, Canva, is a really valuable tool as well. They actually started from more of a like place of graphic design and like flat graphics and doing that kind of stuff, posters, postcards, those kind of things, and have evolved to add video. So that's another tool that's a really good one for some of the type of work we've talked about. But they use different terms as well. And so that's one of the hard parts about it is any of these tools you will need to spend, especially as you get into doing a little more editing, you'll spend a little time just getting used to it. Split is one of those that is a little more common across some of the like newer prosumer tool, like sort of consumer tools. But we used to, if you open up a different app, they might call it a blade tool. They might call it cut. They might call it all sorts of things. So there's certainly a little bit of a learning curve just around how it works. Cool. Did anybody else have any like questions or things they wanted to throw out about any of the homework or anything from last week that we chatted about? Okay. Cool. Well, we'll get into it then. Let me just make sure I have my chat up the way I want. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and then start sharing it again just to see if I can do this a different way. Okay. All right. So, quick review of what we talked about last week. Last week really dug into the technical stuff, right? And so we talked, this is kind of like some of the high level concepts that we talked through last week. And I just want to do a quick refresher on that. We talked about some of the like good hygiene of having a camera. So cleaning your lens. We know that our phones take a beating, especially as we're taking them out with us. We talked a little bit about camera settings. We stick to that standard HD for footage that's going to look really nice on most platforms. We also just talked through how you can switch between 4K and those different frame rates and some of those things. And that's always a useful thing to keep in mind as you're filming. We talked about keeping it steady. We talked about that T-Rex arms idea, which sounds funny, but it's the best description that I can come up with for what I mean when we talk about that. We talked a little bit about light, especially being outside and how to use that natural light because it really is the best form of light. I was filming today and we had some some stuff we were filming inside. I get the privilege of having a whole light kit that, and 2 people to help set it up with me. And then we went outside and it was sunny, and I was like, this looks way better than anything we just did inside, because the sunlight and natural light is just by far the best source of light that we get. Talked about sound and just some of the tips and tricks to recording good sound, whether that's as you're talking on camera or doing a voiceover, getting in a truck, being inside, soft rooms, things like hiding from the wind. And then we got into a little bit of the editing pieces. So the 3-shot rule, where we talked about those wide, medium, and tight shots. And then we talked about that 3-second hook when you're editing, and how do we get people to stop the scroll. We're going to talk about platforms today, and on some of those platforms, that stop the scroll, that 3-second hook becomes all the more important, because it is really what's going to get people to just see what you're doing. Any questions on some of these technical things in that review piece from last week? Did anybody try anything or try to get back to settings and they found like their phone just didn't have the options they were looking for, or they were having issues with anything? Cool. And some nod and no's. Great. All right. Let's jump into now what? So we've learned the concept of a film. We've thought about how we might look at story structure using our introduce, educate, engage, and remind structure. We then got into actually filming the videos. Maybe we've practiced a little bit. We did some voiceover, or we did our 3-shot sequences. And so now maybe we have a finished video. And so the question is, once I have that video, now what do I do? And that's what we're going to talk about today. We really, oh, sorry, I got off track here. I wanted to bump back to something that we had talked about a lot last week, and there were more questions than I was expecting. So I added in an extra slide here. We're going to take a quick break and come back to what I was just jumping into. One of the things that we talked about, and there are a few folks that had mentioned this last week, was that feeling of idea of being comfortable on camera. How do I get used to being either filming myself or filming other people? And so I just wanted to talk a little bit about that for a moment, and a couple pretty specific tip on how we kind of try to get around that. And so talking to a phone, we all know that feels very strange, but it feels strange because all of us, especially those of us in these communities, are really used to talking to humans. We're used to seeing another person's face. We're used to seeing their reactions. When we talk, we want to see people smile or give us a wait a minute and like understand what we're saying is what we're saying is impacting folks. And when we're talking to a camera, we don't get that. We don't get any sort of feedback from the person. And I think that's one of the big things that makes it challenging. But the nice thing that we've talked about a little bit with this is like our audiences are looking for authenticity, not perfection. So I know a few people had mentioned like they were freaked out that they would say the wrong thing, or they had too big of a script and those types of things. But that's really not what we want to do with this type of social content. As we talked about, showing that just like real world peek into what you're up to is going to resonate a lot with folks. So when you're talking to the camera, we talk about a neighbor rule. So stop thinking kind of about talking to a target market or an audience, right? We talked a little bit about who could the customers potentially be. Just imagine like you're chatting with one of your neighbors. I like the idea of chatting with a neighbor over the fence, like you're on an old TV show, and talking to just one person, one-on-one, that genuinely cares about you. So then some of that like uncomfort and that like lack of sort of psychological safety comes away. And that's a little trick you can use when you're talking to a camera. But what it also does is it helps you understand the way that we want you to like frame the type of conversation you're having on the camera, and the type of like videos you're making. We want it to be conversational. We want it to be one-to-one, or one to a small group, where really what you're doing is talking to people and talking to individuals. So that's just a little bit of a note on that front. And one of the things that you can do to sort of practice this, because we don't have another session, we're not going to have homework, but this is just a quick little like skill building thing that you can try. And it fits into our introduce stage of the funnel, is do like a quick video, pick up your phone, record yourself for 60 seconds and start with this prompt. Hi, I'm Duncan, and one thing I really love about my work right now is I get to travel to cool places, and then just continue sharing that. And what you might notice is as you start to frame with those sentences where you start with a prompt, but then you go off from there, it gives you somewhere to start, but it also lets you kind of get out of your head a little bit and get out of that nervousness. And I think the really important reframe that I'll continue to make is that in the introduce stage in particular, but across a lot of this work we're doing on social media, the messy authenticity actually builds a lot more trust with folks than a very polished, perfect video ever could. There's several studies out there. These big brands will do like a massive, perhaps, Super Bowl commercial, spend millions of dollars on it, and then their like influencer who just talked on camera for a little bit about the product, that one resulted in way more sales than this big flashy commercial. And it's because it builds trust and it resonates with people in a very different way. So I want to just jump into that because we didn't get as much time to talk about this last week and there were quite a few questions. Anybody still having like reservations, like big time reservations about filming, putting themselves on camera or talking to camera? Okay. If you do, feel free to reach out to me and we can chat more a little bit about it. We have some other tools that can be helpful as you get into doing that. All right. Now we're going to jump back to some of the things that we're going to do with these videos when they're done. So the first thing that becomes really useful as we're doing these things is the way we post our video content. And this is the way you post on social media at all. So this can be for photos as well as videos. But we want to think of any post that we're doing, especially if there's any sort of product information, as an invitation versus a transaction. I think a lot of times we try to be very informational, right? Transactional, buy our beef, $10 a pound. And we want to shift that concept to an invitation. We have this many products left. Join us in bringing sustainable grazing back to our county or our area. The difference there is that one is like a sales pitch, or not even a sales pitch, but really just like a dry statement. The other one feels like you're inviting somebody to join in on something meaningful. So anytime you're writing the captions for the videos, anytime you're putting these things out on social media, think about that invitation perspective. The only other thing is building co-ownership. And there's some cool tools we can do with polls. Depending on the platform you're on, you can ask questions and ask people to do a sort of this or that thing. That's a really popular thing right now. So using a poll, a question, maybe you're looking at seeds or you're filming yourself saying like, I was just looking at what I'm going to grow this year, making a big plot. Should we try purple carrots or should we stay traditional this year? And ask people to respond, right? Ask them to get in there. And you can, like I said, on all these platforms, you can set up these polls on stories. And it's just another good way to have folks engage with this content. I think sometimes people get to making a video and they make a great little piece of video content, but then they just put it out there. There's no caption, there's no ask for engagement, there's no invitation to do something. And that's the piece we need to remember too as we get these things out on social media, is that we're asking people to engage with them. The result when we build that co-ownership is that customers feel responsible a little bit for the outcome, but they also transform buyers into those partners who are invested and then also just really interested, right? If you're going to farmers markets this year and you ask that question for the carrots example, you might see people that are like excited to come to your farmers market booth and try out those purple carrots because they got to be a part of making the decision and maybe get to have a conversation with them. And they're like, yeah, I was one of the people that was really excited about this. I voted yes. And now you've built that sort of long-term loyal customer with trust, like we've talked about before. These are two things that I think can be underlying just as an approach to all of the content you guys create too. I know I said that at the beginning, but I just want to reinforce that. Like when you're putting photos out, when you're doing just a basic update on social media, that's like a Facebook post, for example, that's just a static thing, or if you're on X and you're doing a text-only post, these things still work really well. So don't feel like this is just a video thing. This is a universal thing. We want to do both of these things with as much, if not all, of our social content as possible. Okay. So the strategy that we talk a lot about is what we call a pillar content strategy. So the way this is really structured is it's to start with the largest piece of content you would create. Now, for some of the work we do, that could be a 3 to 5 minute video that is going to live on the homepage of somebody's website. For what you guys do, that might be bigger than what we're talking about, right? That could be a quick 60-second video that's just an introduction to you and to your operation. But we start with the biggest and then we work our way down. And so what that looks like is creating that pillar piece of long format content. And that's going to be what we really want to point people to inevitably. That's kind of the end of the funnel, if you're familiar with that concept. But then from that pillar content, we've got all these cool video clips we've captured. We've maybe got some great little sound bites, whether that's through voiceover or you on camera. So we want to break that up into short clips. Those short clips are those 1 to 3 shot sequences, little bits and pieces. And you can do as ideally as many as possible out of one of those longer pieces of content. And then we're going to share it everywhere. Now, we're going to talk in a minute about what goes where and how we share these on different platforms. But that gives us a couple different versions and lengths. One of the things that can be kind of crazy, but I'll give you an example. We do a series of videos for an organization in Fargo, and the primary piece of content is 60 seconds long. It's a 60-second TV commercial. From that 60-second TV commercial we shoot, we then create a 30-second version. Then we create a 15-second version. Then we create a 7-second version. Then we do all of those versions in a mobile format that's squeezed so it looks really good on social media. And then we take still photos out of all of the video content that we shared, and we produce another 10 social posts from that. And then we do written content to go with it. And so from this one sort of core 60-second commercial we produce, we're able to produce almost 15 other pieces of content for various platforms and various reasons. And so what I really want you guys to take from today's and tonight's conversation is that when you create something, there's going to be several ways to make use of it. And as we know, our time gets really challenging, especially as we get into the growing season. And so making the most of any of the content you create is the biggest thing we want to talk about here. At the end of the day, this is going to let you guys work smarter, not harder, and it's going to help maintain that consistent presence that we've talked a lot about without having to feel like you're constantly having to go out and film more things. One of the ways this can look too is like you could give yourself 2 or 3 days a month to film a bunch of stuff. And then now the rest of the month you have all of the content you need. So different ways to look at how everybody needs to like layer their work the way they need to. But we see that a lot where people do a big push of capturing for 2 days and then that drives the whole month. Okay. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the way that these things get posted. So I mentioned this a little bit, but just talking about the different lengths. The shortest stuff is what's going to fit in what is often called the reel or the short, depending on what platform you're on. So we know like Instagram and Facebook have this option. And then YouTube also does now. So if you have a YouTube presence, that's another place you can do this. If you have a TikTok presence, that would be another place this would go. And this is that 15 to 30 seconds, ideally with a little bit of music. The music is not there for anything because other than sort of ambience if people click into it. As we learned last week, most people listen to these videos on silent. And so it's really about the visuals capturing the attention. And then once they click in, music and audio can help keep them engaged. And so 15 to 30 seconds with music, capture attention, find new customers who don't know you. That's the teaser bit of this. And so to go back to our examples of what we've done so far, most of the 2 projects we've done already would fit into that reel or that short, the little highlight piece. Then the Facebook post. This is where we're going to go a little longer. So in general, Facebook is the platform that is most often of our social platforms right now is the longer format platform. If you're on LinkedIn, that might be also the other longer format platform, but LinkedIn is more for those sort of B2B folks, which a lot of you guys may not be. But Facebook, LinkedIn, that's where you might go a little bigger. So that's still not going to be necessarily this big core piece, this about us video that you may create from after you've gotten so excited from all this work we've done together. But this could be 30 seconds, maybe 45 seconds, maybe a little longer format because people have a little longer attention spans on Facebook. Facebook is still a platform, especially older generations will go to on a computer. A lot of mobile users, but this one people will do on a computer sometimes. And when people visit platforms on a computer, they spend a lot more time there. The main place, however, good question. Can you use any music you want? I'm going to finish this and I'll come right back to that. The main place, though, where people are getting on their computer and spending a lot of time is going to be on your website or on a newsletter. So one of those formats that comes in through email or is through browsing. This is where we want that longest format pillar piece of content to live. This is great on a homepage of a website or an About Us page of a website. It's also really good to be put into emails or put into newsletters, anything you might send out to folks, to a mailing list, that kind of thing. This is the place where we want our longest format content to go because that's where people are most ready to sit and to learn and to ingest is through that platform. Ideally, this is, like I said, this is that 60-second plus time frame. this is where you're really trying to share a longer format story. One thing I just want to share, we've talked a lot about short content, and I want you guys to start doing that short content. But ultimately, like every one of you guys should have kind of a longer 60-second to 2-minute long sort of who are we, what is our operation, what are we doing, an about us piece. That's where you can get a few more voices involved, right? That might be for some folks that might have a multi-generational thing. That might be asking a parent or a grandparent to talk about why they cared about this so much, and then you get to give your perspective, and that kind of adds layers to it. And so we do want to have a longer format piece that does some of that storytelling at those types of destinations. And then as we talked about social, we work back to shorter lengths. Before I answer the question about music, anybody have any questions about the sort of lengths and the platforms that we've talked about? Okay. So the question that came in was, can you use any music you want? This is a great question. So there's whole professions dedicated to just music rights and licensing. But here's the short answer. Almost every platform that you might use to edit anything will have a library of music that you can use. If you edit within Instagram, for example, if you want to do a post or a reel, you can add music right there. Any music that's available on Instagram, go for it, use it. Canva and CapCut, I believe both also have the ability to drop music in as well. YouTube has a very big royalty free is what it's called, when you don't have to pay for the use of music every time you use it. Royalty free music libraries. There's also a few, if you do quick Google searches, you'll find some other options. Nobody here will really need this yet, but there is some paid resources that you can pay a subscription or a yearly fee to get access to a massive library of music. That's going to be beyond what most folks need. Ultimately, don't try to add anything. If you had a CD you burned, if you have your iTunes library and you got a Rolling Stones song on it, and you put that in your video, the moment you try to upload it to YouTube, it's going to flag probably for copyright infringement. You may not get it to post on Instagram. Instagram is a little more flexible than Facebook. Twitter is the most flexible. They don't do much of that. But you do want to just use the music that's built into those editing resources as a first step. And then if you really don't like that, then there's some other resources I can share, but stick away from any of the big name stuff that you might have through iTunes or a CD or something like that. Okay, moving on. So as we talk about those different platforms, here's a couple, kind of just like a breakdown of some of the ways we're going to look at them. So each platform does serve a different purpose in this ecosystem. And understand them helps make sure that you're meeting your audience where they are, and you're guiding them deeper to get to the broader story. The big thing is we don't want to spread ourselves too thin, right? If you're doing nothing right now, do not decide to do all of this tomorrow. Start fresh, or start small, excuse me. So if you are starting from ground zero, and you are specifically a B2C operation, really you're trying to get individuals interested in what you're doing, Instagram or Facebook is where you should start. One of those two platforms. Assuming you already have some sort of web presence. If you don't have a web presence, make sure you do that first. A lot of organizations now are using their Facebook page as a website effectively. There's a lot of the same information you can get on a website there. It doesn't take the same cost and everything to have that. So Facebook can kind of be that if you needed it to, but Facebook or Instagram would be the place to start, and start with just one of them, and then grow from there. Instagram, TikTok, I would also throw X or Twitter into this bucket. These are really for discovery. So these are where these platforms are designed generally to serve up things to people that they don't actually follow along with, to introduce new markets. So this is going to be for reaching new people who have never heard of what you're doing. That's really where as we talked about, that 3-second hook at the beginning, stopping the scroll, that's where that stuff really comes into play. This is the shortest version of the content, like we just talked about a few moments ago. And so this is where we really want to make sure that we are grabbing people's attention and then giving them that little bit of introduction in our introduce stage, to ask them to click through to learn more, to follow. Facebook. Facebook is a really great place for building community. There's a lot of tools built into Facebook to build community ultimately. But this is where we want to do a little bit of the introduction, but this is also nurturing the relationships with people who already know and trust you. So this is where we get into the educate and the engage parts of our funnel a little more. And so this is where those pieces we're letting folks learn even more about what we're doing. This is where we might be doing some of those poll pieces, right? We're asking people that are already interested in following us to engage with us a little more. And then we have YouTube and a website. YouTube is something that you may or may not want to go down that path. But these are what we call best for storage. These are the permanent home for the different stories that people can return to. So that's like that long format one I was talking about just a few slides ago, where when you make that bigger piece that's really the about you, we want that to live somewhere and just be this resource for people to find and go back to. It's also the one thing that can be more constant, right? Facebook, Instagram, I don't know if anybody has tried to ever, like, they saw a video on Instagram or Facebook, they didn't like it, they didn't engage with it, and then like 2 days later they try to go back and find it to share it with their friends. It's an almost impossible task to do that, because there's so much content going on to those platforms every day, and they're constantly trying to serve you up with new and different things based on your engagement. So it's important to have a place that people can go back and reference and find things. If you're doing a lot of video content, that's really the reason why you jump to a YouTube. YouTube's free. You can get an account. You can put stuff in there. The best thing about it, or the really valuable thing about it, is it can become a way to embed videos into other places, right? You get links then, and you can send them as part of an email. You can send them, you can have a QR code send straight to a YouTube video if you wanted, that you put on products and things like that. And so if you're planning on making lots and lots of videos, YouTube is a good resource to just have as that storage piece. You can also periodically go in and change things. You can, if a video is no longer relevant, you can make it private, but you can still leave it there. So if you ever wanted to make it public again, you can. You can create unlisted videos that allow you to have them live somewhere, but you can share them, but they're not publicly findable. So maybe there's a video that I want to share every time a new customer joins my CSA, but I don't really want just the general public to know about it. So you can make it unlisted. So there's some value in having YouTube if you're planning on doing quite a bit of video content. Otherwise, your website works well for that storage piece. Any questions about platforms, or any platforms I maybe haven't mentioned here? Is there anybody who's like, social media platforms, I don't even want to think about those. How do I do video without social media? Got a quiet group tonight. Feel free to jump in the chat too if you don't want to turn the mic on and dive in either. Okay. If you have questions about platforms, please let me know. One of the things, and we talked about this in kind of the introduction phase, is all of our social media platforms right now are moving towards video first content. Because one, we're creating more videos. Two, video is getting smaller file sizes, and all of our connection, Wi-Fi, cell towers are all getting faster. It's allowing social media to prioritize video in a way that it hasn't before. So everywhere you look, every platform you engage with is finding ways to try to be more video forward. And so there's a lot of opportunity for video to go out there, even if it's not through sort of these big primary ones we've talked about. If you're posting in, if you have community groups online, if you're in something like a Reddit or in these other sort of community building forums and that type of stuff, they're great places to put video. We all know that there's like local sort of TVs, or like you go to doctor's offices, they'll have ads and stuff like that. Everywhere we go, there's video happening. And so it's important that you're thinking about what platforms you can have, even if they're not these like three. If you're saying, I never want to be on Facebook, it's going to be challenging, but there are other ways to get out there. Okay. So the last thing I want to do is we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things, the like strategy pieces that we talked about in our first one, as a comeback to this final step of actually sharing these things out in the world. I want to talk just about our remind stage. So this is kind of fun because we're going to remind you about our remind stage here. Um, we want to celebrate shared wins. So this is not just about announcing outcomes. It's about acknowledging your community's roles. We talked about this at the beginning a little bit with those caption opportunities. Is transforming posts and shares like the barn is fixed into because you bought our eggs this winter, we were able to fix the barn. We did this together. We want to shift all of our language, both within the videos and then the posts that we're sharing about that, to that collective achievement that folks are doing. We also know that transformation stories really add a lot of engagement, showing before and after journey of the season, showing that visual proof of progress, growth, and change creates really powerful emotional connections. That sounds really broad, right? I have to do a before and after. That can be as simple as showing livestock in the spring when they're born and now showing them 3 months later and how much they've grown. That can be as simple as showing seeds to what's in the ground, showing what's in the ground when you planted it to where it is by July. Really think of this as like not a daunting task to show a before and after, but as a simple way to just show that quick piece of content. And then the last thing, and this is one we talked about early on, but this is really important to do, the no ask check-in. So the remind stage, the remind piece of this, which is ultimately one of the best things we can do on social media, introduce and remind are our two best opportunities for what I call low-hanging fruit content, is to remind folks that you like them, remind folks that you love them, right? That's what we talk about. Thank you for being a part of this. Posting on social media without asking for anything. We're all inundated by ads constantly. We're all inundated by folks asking for things on social media. And so when you get a post, you come across something that's somebody just thanking you for following along on the journey, thanking you for engaging with the content, whatever it is, that's a great way to just remind people that you're there. And we like to say if we remind people that we love them, that will remind them that they love us too. And then they will continue to be your supporters and trusted community members. So I put together like a sort of an example of a potential marketing rhythm you might use. And this is based on like a month. And as we talked about these different stages, these different pieces of our funnel, we broke that up into a couple different things here. So week one is that introduction. That's introducing things. And you can, we talked, had a couple questions about the sort of cycle of this, but this could be something that you do every month for like a 3-month period if you wanted. Week one is that introduction. This is an introduction to yourself. Maybe you've already done the introduction to yourself and you don't feel like you need to. So this could be an introduction to a season or an introduction to a project that's going on right now. Share what makes that thing unique. So that could, again, this could be broader as an introduction to you, or it could be, hey, we're about to head into planting season. Here's a little introduction about what that looks like, why it's unique, what's special about it. Weeks 2 and 3, that's where we're going to educate a little bit. Now we've introduced them week 1. Okay, cool. Now what are we doing this week with planting? Well, we're prepping all of these things. We're making sure this piece of equipment is ready to go. That can be kind of challenging. And we're doing some fun troubleshooting and we film that. But 2 to 3 weeks on that education stage. That's the behind the scenes stuff, right? We talked about how that's a really cool engagement for people to understand what's going on behind the scenes. Because a lot of us, even those of us in a really, quite frankly, ag forward state, a lot of people don't even know what's going on behind the scenes. At least they think they do, or they have a general idea, but really showing people what's going on day to day is a neat way to engage with them. So educate 2 to 3. Engaging, this is the ask, right? This is where we're inviting people to do something. This could be, like we talked about earlier, this could be that poll of like, what's a crop choice for me? Are we doing purple carrots or not? This could be an ask specifically to buy something or to join the CSA to do something in that way. But this is the point where we're really like asking them to do something. At this point, though, they've already had 3 weeks of learning about us and what we're up to. And so it's usually a pretty easy engagement at that point. And then the one that's just ever ongoing and should be a part of kind of all of these posts, but then you can always do as sort of a wrap up thing at the end of this month, is that remind stage, the thank you. Thanks for supporting us. Thanks for following along. Thanks for listening as I shared all this cool stuff that I love about this piece of farm equipment I have. That's the thing that we want to continue to do no matter what. So that's an example of a way that you could kind of plan your content out And then in each one of these weeks, that's where you might have one or two of those short videos that you shared. That's that 15 to 30 seconds on each of those stages. And then you might do one larger format video that's 60 to 90 in just one of these things. So based on the month, you might say education is where I'm leaning hard this month. That's where your 60 to 90-second video might go in. And then that gives you a little bit of a breakup of the content throughout the month. Any questions about this like example that you can take in terms of a structure? Okay. I really recommend trying to do sort of like a week by week planning for any of this type of content. It's detailed enough or like specific enough that it gives you something to work towards, but it's not overwhelming to say like on this day I'm going to film this, on this day I'm going to film this. It gives you some time and some flexibility. So do your best to do that. And I really would love for you to use introduce, engage, educate, and remind as your like themes for any of those things that you're creating, just to give you a little bit of a direction, right? It doesn't need to be too on the nose, but just to give you a little bit of a direction of like why you are going to go out and film today, so that you have that in the back of your mind as you're capturing whatever it is you're capturing. Okay, I'm gonna pause for questions one more time.
There's a couple in the chat.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, I'm on a smaller screen today because I'm, like I said, I'm in a hotel and I don't have enough room for all of my windows. So I'm going to open up the chat and we'll get into that. All right. Let's look here. So starting with, is it possible to move older videos from a Facebook page to a YouTube channel? If it's a Facebook page you own that you're a part of, you should be able to download those videos out of Facebook. Or if you still have them on where you created them, that's another way to do it. But you should be able to download from Facebook if it's something, specifically if it's something you posted originally. And then that's a great thing to do, is put it over onto a YouTube channel. One of the things you can do within YouTube as well is you can create playlists. And that's something that I really think is a great way, both to stay organized for yourself when we think of it as that storage piece, but also to help folks that might be coming to look at videos see some similar content. So you can make playlists of different, you could do that by time frame, right? A 2025 playlist, a 2024 playlist. You could do that by theme, right? It could be a planting playlist, a harvesting playlist. It could be a farmer's market playlist. You could do them that way too. So different ways to do it. Next question. I had a 3-minute documentary movie made for me and sent via Vimeo. It takes me forever to figure out how to share videos. Did your training last week tell about apps to make the shortcuts from long film to use for posting? Yeah, so Lynn asked that. That's a great question. So if you have this longer format piece from Vimeo, depending on if there was the nature of how you kind of got that, if you had hired somebody to do it, if it was given to you, you do want to just make sure you like touch base with whoever made it to make sure that they're comfortable with you chopping it up. But if you download something like that from Vimeo, you can bring that into any of the platforms we talked about, Canva, CapCut, the using even Instagram on your phone or one of the editors on your phone in the app will work. And you can pull little pieces out of it. And I would really recommend you do that, because if you have a 3-minute documentary, there's got to be tons of content in there that could be repurposed for social media, that would give you a great opportunity to do 1, 2, 3 months of this this posting. So big thing there though is just to double check. Some folks, I do a lot of the sort of 3-minute documentary stuff, right? And we have, based on the type of folks we work with and the contracts, we have different language about like what people can do with our footage afterwards, how they get access, approvals, those things. So depending on the nature of how you came to get that film, just make sure you cross check those boxes. But that's a great opportunity. One of the things that oftentimes folks will do if you do hire a professional crew at any point, is you can ask them for the raw footage. You can ask them for the rest of the stuff. And then you can go in and start playing around with it yourself. Fantastic. Well, it looks like it was a gift and you're free to use it however you want. So then, yeah, you should be just fine to chop it up and make shorter cuts. The only thing that can get tricky with those like longer format videos, if you're starting from that and trying to cut it down, but you don't have the original media, is music. Because sometimes you'll have music underneath the like the interview audio or voiceover, and you can't remove that. That's really tough. There's a couple AI platforms out there that are starting to try to provide a service to do that. One of them is called Speaker Split. that you could try out if you wanted to, if you had music under spoken word and it tries to like break them apart, but it doesn't work super well yet. And so that's the only challenges you might run into, is some weird music underneath if you're cutting only 15 seconds and there's a music track. But give it a try, see what you can do. Cool. I think that was the questions in the chat. Any other quick questions at this point? Okay. All right. A little bit faster tonight than I was expecting. We had fewer questions on some of this content. I was actually expecting this one to be the biggest question generating presentation, but that's all right. So ideally, after the last 3 sessions, you guys are ready to help grow your community. The one thing I just want to point out, though, is the most powerful marketing tool that you have is not the camera. It's not the social media strategy. It's not the schedule that we just talked about, the frequency you post. It's your authentic story and the willingness to share it, particularly imperfectly. Remember that your community isn't looking for perfection. They're looking for connection. They're looking for transparency, and the opportunity to be part of something meaningful. They want to learn about what you're doing. They want to understand it, and they want to find out how they can support. Every post, every video, every interaction is an invitation to build that relationship and build that trust that keeps folks coming back. Start small. Don't start big. We talked about one platform at a time. Stay consistent, and then watch as your buyers transform into those partners, those advocates, and those champions for your operation. One of the things that's such a fun and neat piece about this type of work is when you start to see people share what you're doing. That's how you really know you're doing a great job. If you have posted several videos and it's of your product or it's of what you're up to, and somebody who's been following along, and you know because they've been liking your videos, they've been liking your posts, maybe you've met them in person, and now they start to share those on their social media, that's where you start to realize that, oh, now I've transformed this person from just a partner, just a community member, to a champion for what I do. So that's always a good little like heads up that you're in the right direction. And last but not least, you guys got this. I know that it can be really intimidating to jump into video in particular. It can be intimidating to put yourself out there on social media, especially when it's with something that's so near and dear to all of us, like our own businesses, our own livelihoods. But you guys got this. And I think with the foundation we've laid with these 3 sessions, the foundation you've gotten with some of the other work you guys have done with this leadership course, you're ready to get after it. So I'll pause there. If there's any final questions, I'd love to take them now about tonight, about the last few different pieces. I got a question about, will you be sharing the homework videos? I feel like they might be inspiring. What I think we might be able to do, and Shelby, you can maybe like correct me in the moment if I'm wrong here. I only got a few homework videos, but what we could put together is maybe put together like a Google Drive place where folks could put them in for just this group. You could upload them there so then other people can see what you did, and just be able to understand and see what other folks have done. And that way, in a bit of a private or closed group, we can all see what other folks are up to. We did have a question about a recommendation for tripods. When you guys I have a link in the slide deck from last week that does have some Amazon options. It's kind of like the best sellers on Amazon for phone tripods, which is a great place to start. There's options that are full from the ground all the way up to be able to film somebody standing. There's options that are more tabletop designed. There's options that have a light around them. There's lots of choices, lots of budget ranges from $20 to $100. So take a peek at that when you get the slides after this. Cool. I put my contact info here. You can email me directly. I think most of you have that already. I have 2 different Instagrams. One is Duncan Will. That's my personal one, but you feel free to follow it. That's the one I actually am more active on. And then Tellwell Duncan, features a lot of the behind the scenes of the video work that we do at Tellwell. So if you ever want to be inspired by some cool cameras, behind the scenes photos of those types of things, that's a good place to go and follow. Well, I got done about 10 minutes earlier than expected here. Does anybody have any final comments, questions, anything they're wondering about this week or the last 2? All right. Well, if you're feeling a little shy and you still have questions, send an email to me, Duncan at wetellwell.com. It can be easy to forget the we in there. So wetellwell.com. I guess I'll pass it back over to you, Shelby.
Thank you. We really appreciate your time and the resources that you provided. And thank you to everyone who stuck around. We're going to put a survey in the chat if you all could take a couple minutes to take that. That would be really awesome. And a couple last minute housekeeping things. You'll get an email from me probably and Renee at some point with a resource doc, and I will send out the recording of this webinar. And then take the survey and keep an eye out for our next Nourishing Our Roots session. That'll be happening later this fall. So if we don't have any other questions, we really appreciate you all taking the time to spend with us, and we hope that you got some value out of these sessions. Feel free to reach out to Duncan or myself or Renee, and we can get any of your questions answered or help you with anything you might need. So have a great night, everyone.